guys, welcome back. So I know a lot of the past videos have been tips and skills that you can use to better your mental health, but I thought it would be important to have one video where we talk about how you can be a better support to your friends, family members, or other people that you consider close. And I know during this time many people have increased or raised anxiety and stress levels due to the type of situation that we're living in. But I would suggest not putting all that responsibility on yourself. Don't try to fix the situation on your own, because even though you probably have the best intentions, you do not have the skills and resources that an expert would. So my first tip would be to remember contact information of an expert. Now, there'll be links somewhere on the screen and numbers and organizations that I would highly suggest you save somewhere, whether it be as a contact, in your notes, on a piece of paper, but somewhere, in case you feel that someone is suffering from a mental health issue and you would like to get an expert's opinion. Right now, there are people working around the clock for people like that. I would highly suggest saving something on the screen right now. And also, if the situation is an emergency situation where the person is considering suicide, there are also a number of suicide hotlines that you can call, and this link that will again be somewhere on the screen has organized the hotlines for many countries around the world, including India, but depending on where you are, you can go on this link and find the number that works for wherever you live, and hopefully that can help you. So again, I would suggest maybe saving one of those numbers as well, just because you never know when you might need to use it, and it is really important information. And I know lots of people will be like, oh, but why do you have that on your phone? But honestly, again, the whole point of this video or these videos are to overcome the stigma around mental health, and just having this information could maybe help someone in desperate need. By having this information on you, you can be a better supportive friend to someone who is suffering from a mental health issue. Again, now let's focus on if the situation really was an emergency. The first thing that you can do if the person has the means to carry out suicide is to call the emergency services, depending on what type of suicide it is. So that could be the police or an ambulance, and they will know what to do immediately. And while you're waiting for them to come, if they are taking their time, I would suggest just trying to carry out a conversation, asking them open-ended questions if you can, just because studies have shown that just by talking, you're winding their momentum down, and hopefully as they start talking and expressing their thoughts, they may second guess themselves and may realize that they don't want to do this after all. And even if they don't have that whole experience, you're still waiting on the emergency services and they will know what to do when they get there. So that is one thing that you can try. You're not completely helpless, but again, each situation is different, and I am also not an expert, so none of this is guaranteed to work, but these are things that you can try. It is also important to look at the care plan perhaps their therapist or the psychiatrist or the hospital gives them after they are released, just because if you take an interest in their treatment, you can be perhaps a friend that drives them to therapy or encourages them to continue on their treatment plan. And by doing this, you're just helping them throughout this difficult process, and you are encouraging them to continue even though it may be difficult, but you're also just showing them that they're not alone and that they can count on you, which is extremely important during this mental health journey, because a lot of the time, a lot of people feel like they're isolated and no one else understands their issues. But by taking an interest in important things like this, they can start trusting you, but they also know that you're looking out for them, which is, again, extremely important. In case you have conversations about suicide and about their experience, or perhaps they haven't even thought about committing suicide, but you see changes in their mental health and you are worried about them, there are things that you can do. And in conversations, it is important for you to be more accepting and be more opening. So I know sometimes it can be overwhelming, and again, as I said, you don't have the resources and you shouldn't have to feel that responsibility to fix the problem, but it is important to just understand some few easy things that you can do during these conversations. Again, as I said before, the first thing you can do is just be reassuring, but also taking that extra step and going and participating in activities with them, whether it be taking them to their treatment sessions or taking them to a therapist or doing things with them rather than telling them to do them, because it's very easy for us to say, oh, just go do it, but actually carrying out takes some motivation, and asking for help is always the first step. So if you can make that easier for them, then you're already doing a great job. It's also important to just encourage them to talk. Some people will already feel like they're holding back because they don't want to burden you with their problems. But if you are the person that they feel comfortable around, you can be the person to get an expert involved. So some people won't go straight away to therapy because they don't want to talk to a stranger and they have a boundary with that person. But if you feel close enough, then you can initiate that and then encourage them to go get help, encourage them to talk to an expert. But it can only start once they open up a little bit, and that may be with you. And it's also important to realize that from your perspective, you may think that their problems are not bad and you have a very easy fix to all of it. But sometimes, or a lot of the time in fact, people don't want to hear solutions, but they just want to be heard. So let them talk, let them get their thought process out there, and understand and try and understand their perspective, because your role isn't to just, oh, here, how did you not see that? Or, come on, go back to normal, like, what's wrong with you? You should never say any of those things. Instead, ask questions like, what's making you feel so bad? What would make you feel better? And how can I help? So ask them for the ways that you can help, rather than just giving them solutions you think that they will like, because most of the time they may feel ignored, or it may feel like you're looking down on them, which can also make them feel worse. So just be aware of the way that you are coming across to someone in those type of conversations. If you really are worried about your friend and you're worried that they have considered suicide or having thoughts of suicide, it is important to just go out and ask them. Of course, I would suggest perhaps having a lot of evidence, or maybe having some reason to do it rather than it just being random. But people sometimes are worried that when you ask that, then after that they start thinking of suicidal thoughts. But really, there is no evidence of that. Studies have shown that actually asking people, they tend to be honest, or even feel like they have someone listening to them and looking out for them. So if you have to ask that question, I would feel like you should. Don't feel like it could make the situation worse. In fact, it can make it much better. You can get them in touch with an expert before the situation becomes an emergency, and again, that's extremely important and extremely helpful. Also, in these situations, a lot of people will say, oh, but please don't tell anyone else, about the way that I'm feeling or about the things that I've told you. And even though you may feel like, oh, but you have this bond with this person and you don't want it to break, if it's a threat, it is your responsibility to talk to an expert or talk to their parent or talk to someone who you can trust to get them expert help. Because in these situations, that is honestly doing the right thing. And although you might feel guilty and you might feel like you're betraying your friend or your family member, it is important to realize that in the long term, the talking to an expert will probably be the best thing for them. In the end, they hopefully will be thankful for it. Also, it is important during this time to try and keep your friend or your family member off any addictive substances, whether it be alcohol or drugs, just because it can make the situation worse, and people often use it as a coping mechanism to keep their mind off things, but in the long term they may feel dependent on it, and that is not the result that you want. So again, lead by example. Don't ask them to go out for a drink during this time. Don't say, oh, let's just party, and your mind will be off it. It's important to be there for them and not suggest any of those sorts of ideas during this time. And again, if you can and it isn't intrusive, I would suggest trying not to leave them on their own, whether it be you being there or someone else as well. If they are suicidal, especially, do not leave them on their own, because a lot of the time, if they feel alone, they start to overthink and may even encourage themselves to attempt the suicide. But honestly, if they are around someone else, they can talk to them, they can hear two sides of the perspective rather than just listen to their voice in their head. So it is important to try and not leave them alone during this time. So if you can't be there 24/7, try and get maybe a parent or another friend to look out for them. And of course, if the situation is in fact where the person is suicidal, remove harmful items from their house, whether it be sharp objects or medication that they can overdose on. Just be aware of the things that they are doing. Of course, remove it from their house and watch the dosage in case they do need the medicine. But again, make sure you are aware of what they're doing and how they're using certain things in their own house or wherever they live, and they are being safe with themselves. Now, before it gets to the stage where you need to remove harmful objects from their house, there are a few other signs that you can look out for. And for other mental health issues, I kind of talked about them in the other video, which was like the background about general mental health disorders. But in this case, I'm talking mainly just about suicide. And you'll see some of the symptoms do overlap, but again, I'm just repeating them, reinforcing them, so in case you see some of these things, of course, don't overreact. I would say talk to the person, try and see what's on their mind. Maybe it's not what you think at all. Just keep in mind that this could be a possibility. So some of them are, if you notice that they're feeling hopeless or they keep repeating themselves saying that they are a burden on other people, if they withdraw from friends and family, especially if they're normally a person who doesn't do that. So if that's a very major shift in their life, maybe that is something you want to talk about with them. If they lose interest in activities, so whether this is just hobbies or their day-to-day life, like going to classes, or just even not leaving their room or not leaving their bed, and not even making the effort to shower or clean themselves regularly, then I would definitely go check up on them. And you can even do this subtly, like if they haven't left their room for a while and they're missing class, you can go in with the class resources that they missed and start that conversation like that. And it's best to start these conversations subtly, because perhaps you may be overthinking something and you don't know the full story. So don't go accusing them or asking them if they're suicidal straight away. I would say that can be dangerous sometimes and can even make them lose trust in you. But again, you know the situation, you know the type of options that are out there, and it is up to you in the end what you want to do. Things that you can look out for are giving away possessions, saying that they might not need things anymore, extreme mood swings, saying goodbye to friends and family, or talking about death and suicide regularly, mentioning that they want to kill themselves or end their life, or mentioning that multiple times. Even as a joke, sometimes it is important to check up on them and make sure that they are healthy mental health wise, and just being a good supportive friend otherwise. Now, one thing that is advisable if you have a friend who has a history of mental health problems or is suffering from mental health problems is to create a crisis plan, and that is a list of supports that you write out that the person may think is useful. So perhaps their regular therapist number, a suicide hotline, or some distractions that you can use that you know are effective, things like that you can put in a plan. So in case there ever is an emergency situation, you are equipped with some resources that you can use and you can pull out during that time. And a lot of the times, I think hospitals and therapists do that with the person anyway. But again, if you don't have to make it, at least know what's on the list. Just try and be aware of that, so in case you are the person that is alone or that they call when they are in that emergency situation, you know what you can do and you can be a good friend. The last thing that I'll leave you with is to learn more about the mental health policies in whether it be your school, your country, your office. I would say start small, because sometimes you may have resources that you're just overlooking, and just be aware of them. Be aware of the resources that are already given to you, because sometimes those are just easier and can even be free of cost sometimes. So really look into that and see, even if you don't need it, if someone else does, you can push them in the right directions. And I think it's really important just to know more about what your company does, or what your school does, or what your university does. Wherever it may be, just learn more about mental health in your environment, because you'll never know when you will need that information, but it is really important information, so keep that in mind. Well, that's all my tips from this video. Of course, if you do want more tips, I would suggest, again, I've said this so many times now, but talking to an expert. They know what they're doing. They might even just suggest, oh, well, send them to me, but ask them specifically. If you have a personal situation, talk to them about it if you can. It's their job to listen to you, so, you know, make the most of it. And if anything, I hope you learned something from this video. If you did, that's great. Again, take a moment to learn something about the mental health policies in your environment, or take a moment to save a hotline on your phone, or on a piece of paper somewhere. I think those are the two things that I would really hope that you took from this video, because you really never know when you'll need that information, but it is so important. But that's it from me, so thank you for watching, and yeah, I hope that was useful. Bye!